Greetings to you once more, fellow travelers. This is Krotnip speaking, and today I'm back again to welcome you to the logbook of a simple Lindworm traveler. Today we are finally going to be taking a look at the Varank units and their potential character attachments at the end of the calendar year 2024. I have already done a video like this one about the orc units and the potential combinations that they can create with the Northern Tribes characters available to us at the closing of the year 2024. And I was hoping to release this piece shortly thereafter. Unfortunately, making this type of analysis video has turned out to be quite an arduous task, and I have had to push back the release of this one a few weeks into the 2025. The situation is made a bit worse by the fact that we just got spoiled the Ice Archers card for the next Varank unit release, but I have chosen not to include them in this analysis since this is supposed to be a companion piece for the Orc one, and I am looking forward to making a next one, another one like this at the end of 2025. And secondly, because I haven't had any time to test via proxies effectively the Ice Archers at the table, so I really don't know what to say about them at this point anyway. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. First, a quick few words on what this video is going to be all about. As I already said, I have done a video just like this one on the Northern Tribes orc units that have been released or at least thoroughly spoiled in 2024, and I highly recommend you to look at that video first, at least the preamble there, because I'm going to be going through this slide a lot quicker on this video than on the previous one, because A, I don't want to repeat myself too much, and B, because the video last time turned out to be pretty long, and this is probably not going to be all that different in that aspect. So if we can shave a few minutes from the beginning, then every little bit helps, right? So, as already outlined in my first video of this type, my unit analysis pieces are about talking specific units in a vacuum essentially, so not taking into account too much what they can do with other units and what potential combinations that they can form. And in this video I'm now going to delve deeper into what potential unit and attachable character combinations the Varank units of the Northern Tribes can achieve as the first year or half a year of Warcrow is drawing to a close. I'm going to be doing a very much a playful and just for interest's sake comparison or evaluation of the various combinations, and I have decided to go with a three-tiered system on how I'm going to be creating the combinations that we are going to be discussing today. Those units that are about to receive the excellent grading are supposed to be combinations that are pretty straightforward to use, and they will provide good value in my opinion in the current meta and the current way that the Warcrow is in its infancy. So great value combinations that seem rather strong from the get-go. The second category is called situational, and this is reserved for unit combinations that I don't see as outrightly powerful as the excellent combinations, but maybe they are the types of combinations that can pay dividends in certain circumstances or situations, or maybe they can be part of a particular strategy or counter strategy, and thus situationally they are powerful, even potentially more powerful than some of the excellent combinations. And then the last category is opportunistic. These are the combinations that I don't see worthwhile as of right now under most circumstances, if and when we take into account that we could have recruited a different unit or a different character to our company and maybe made a combination out of those different options that we chose not to include by including the models that we did. Obviously, this does not mean that the last group of models and their combinations is in any shape or form bad or unplayable, but rather that I don't see the optimal value in them as of right now. And I'm hoping that when, if everything goes well, I'm able to revisit this subject in a year from now, then I can evaluate whether some opportunistic combinations have turned into situational or excellent ones and vice versa, and we are going to see the skills of us players improving and also the meta of the Warcrow shaping up as more and more factions and more units are released. Please do remember that when I'm talking about these unit and character combinations, I am not taking into account the opportunity cost of running a character solo. So I'm just going to be talking about whether I like the combination of the unit and the character or not, and not whether they should be just run separately. Also, this comparison is just for laughs, just for fun. Don't take it too seriously, but be sure to let me know in the comments what I got wrong so that we can get the discussion going. Since agreeing and especially disagreeing in a constructive and forward-looking way is a way of advancing our knowledge of the game, I believe. So, without more than 5 minutes of a preamble, let's start by taking a look at the Varank characters that are naturally able to join Varank units. As I'm sure you are aware of by now, if you are familiar with the game of Warcrow or the content that I have been creating for this channel, in the Northern Tribes faction of Warcrow, we have two cultures that have allied with one another and are now making war upon their enemies together, and these are the Orcs and the Varanks. And at base, in base sense, in the way that the unit cards have been written, the Varank characters can usually only join Varank units, and Orc characters can usually only join Orc units. So you have to make certain decisions, or rather a decision, when constructing your force if you want to mix and match the two. And that is to include a high command character with the War Alliance ability. So the first characters that we are going to be talking, and the first character unit combinations rather, that we are going to be talking about are going to be the ones that don't require any special setup when making your list. It's just include these two, combine them and see how it goes. Just as previously, I have made these tongue-in-cheek names I have rather come up with these tongue-in-cheek names for all of these combinations, just to differentiate them and maybe get a few chuckles out of you watching this video, or maybe you find something to be cool and worthwhile using when naming these unit combinations for your rosters or something. As you can see, for one reason or another, the Korvuspelli press kit that most of us use for getting high resolution pictures of the unit cards does not actually include the skin changers nor any other of the unit cards that come with the Beyond Winds from the North box. I just checked before finalizing this video, and they still aren't there. So I have had to use my own pictures that aren't of as crisp quality, but I'm sure they will get the job done. And if you have the cards back home, you can just reference them and no harm done. So let's start by talking about, speaking from the Beyond Winds from the North, the skin changer unit, and how about attaching the unnamed Hersir character to them. The skin changers are a expensive elite unit that's only made up of two models, so they really suffer from the fact that as they will lose important part of their performance once they suffer their first casualty. And including a officer type character, which with one exception, all the characters released so far are, gives to the skin changers is that crucial effective third member for that unit, which means that the unit will actually not suffer the impaired performance of having taken half casualties at all at any stage, since the first model lost will not impair their performance at all, and after you lose the second model, the unit is destroyed and the character detaches to a solo model. Then again, the fact that the Hersir improves their conquest by providing them +1 does not actually mean all that much, since the skin changers naturally don't have any conquest value on their card, so you are looking at a meager conquest 1 unit, so they aren't going to be all that impactful when capturing objectives unless you can face off against Conquest Zero enemies, or you can push several of your units into the area of an objective to outscore your enemy that way, which is actually something that I have done in my previous games, so that possibility obviously is there, even though it's more activation intensive than actually using just a single unit to get the job done. While the Hersir's willpower of a orange and a yellow dice that he imposes upon his unit is exactly the same as the skin changer, so there's actually no benefit willpower-wise for the attachment. The additional point of morale actually helps, since it brings the skin changers up to a respectable morale value of 3, which means that they can either suffer quite a lot of stress before they have to start testing whether they break, or in the more likely scenario they are going to be able to chain several activations together per turn if they are free of stress at the beginning, or rather during a round if they are free of stress at the beginning of the round via just starting the battle, or maybe via resting, or in the future another method of managing the stress of your Varank troops. The skin changers under the watchful eye of the Hersir are going to be psychologically extremely reliable, since they have alternative methods of improving their willpower roll results should you not like what you see. Firstly, and this is something that I actually overlooked when I was talking about the Hersir and not the Merciless for that matter, in their respective unit analysis pieces, and that's the fact that you can actually use the Berserker Rage ability granted by the Hersirs to die killing ability to produce a success for your willpower roll if you are willing to suffer a wound for doing that. So that's a way that you can effectively circumvent difficulty 1 willpower tests even if you fail when you roll your dice, and if you are looking for 2 successes and only get 1, you can suffer that wound to get the second success and thus pass the test. The Hersir also has another method of forcing the unit he is leading to into passing their willpower tests, and that is by using the not one step back command skill, which costs you a command token, yes, but it allows you to pass a test that you have just failed just by spending the token. So the skin changers under the Hersir are not going to be fleeing the battlefield unless you decide that it's okay for them to do so, or you have absolutely spent all of your resources and the battle is looking pretty bad at that point anyway. While the Hersir's actual additional damage that he provides isn't all that amazing for the skin changers, especially when we look at how this stacks up proportionally to how much much damage the skin changes are supposed to be dealing by themselves from the get-go, and also when we take into the calculus the fact that you probably don't want to be taking too many wounds on your skin changes via using Berserker Rage, because you run the risk of effectively exchanging expensive wounds from your elite infantry unit to deal damage to a lesser value target. So there's also that. But at the same time, the Hersir does provide the skin changers with two switch abilities, and both of these use symbols that the skin changers can't naturally make use of. So this means that no matter what symbols you are rolling, the skin changers under the leadership of the Hersir can make some use out of them, which is pretty nice and pretty cool, and that allows you to leverage the large amount of dice that the skin changers are rolling in order to achieve a multitude of effects on your enemy. The double solid special switch is going to be removing blocks from your opponent, which actually means that it adds to the effective damage of the skin changers. This doesn't actually raise the potential ceiling of damage that the skin changers can inflict, but rather it helps them bring up their average by allowing them to make use of the special symbols that they have access to. The hollow success switch that the Hersir brings is only usable effectively once per attack, since you are inflicting the disarmed state upon your enemy, and you can't deal that condition to your opponent several times over. But then again, the skin changers average amount of hollow successes that they are providing isn't all that big anyway, so you aren't probably under most circumstances going to be wasting that many hollow successes anyway. Rather unfortunately for this particular unit and character combination, the skin changers don't have a natural offensive push modifier of their own, so it's probably not going to be all that worthwhile usually to activate the Hersir's single success, additional automatic success causing push modifier on the offensive, and then again on the defensive, where the skin changers would have their own natural push modifier, the Hersir does not have the ability to add any power to this stress inducing ability, so their abilities don't really mix and match all that well in this regard. All in all, I do consider the skin changes and the Hersir to be quite a decently rounded package that does not break the bank, unlike some of the combinations that are potentially out there, and some of the combinations that we are in fact going to be discussing shortly. But then again, this isn't a benchmark performing combination either, so I am pretty happy calling this one situational. This leads us to the second potential combination that can be forged with the Hersir character, and that is with the Varank skirmisher unit, Tundra Marauders. Interestingly enough, when we were discussing the orc units in the previous episode, we were in fact talking about two frontline melee infantry units. One was a cheap and cheerful basic infantry unit, and the other one was a more elite version of more or less the same combat role. But when we are talking about the skin changers and the Tundra Marauders, while there is some overlap between the two, especially if you choose to utilize the Arctic Fox totem on the skin changers. Usually we are considering the Tundra Marauders to be more of a skirmisher unit and the skin changers to be a shock infantry unit, so their roles are very different in that way, and that's going to be showing this difference is going to be showing itself when we are going to be analyzing the different combinations in this episode. The Tundra Marauders also appreciate the fact that Hersir and most of the characters henceforth are actually officer type characters, since this nudges the amount of casualties that they need to suffer before any impairment of performance happens from 2 to 3. And in this instance, this loss of performance is further mitigated by the fact that the 2 yellow dice provide almost exactly the same amount of expected effective damage as 2 orange dice would if we take into account the Hersir provided double special switch and we expect the enemy to roll enough blocks to be worthwhile removing using these dice. So the Hersir provides the Tundra Marauders with a surprising amount of resilience when it comes to their ability to perform in combat, even once they have sustained some rather major damage. The hollow success switch that the Hersir has access to, or grants the Tundra Marauders access to, helps them be even more annoying to deal with. When you combine that with the fact that the Tundra Marauders have a decent defense on their own, at above half strength they have that automatic block symbol in their dice roll, you might even be able to engineer situations where it's quite safe for the Tundra Marauders to use the first action of their activation to simply disengage from melee even against a unit that's able to perform an opportunity attack, and then to leverage the Snow Leopard tattoo to be in the next place where they are required. The extra conquest that the Hersir provides is rather important here, since a scouting powerful place ability using skirmisher unit at Conquest 2 can be rather dangerous from a scenario play standpoint, and the fact that the Hersir provides additional willpower and morale is also important, since the psychological profile of the Tundra Marauders is rather weak from the get-go. As already talked about when it came to the skin changers, the Hersir does give quite a strong and resilient shock resistance factor to the Tundra Marauders, meaning that they won't be fleeing against their enemies unless you are absolutely spent or willing to see them do so. And the fact that the Tundra Marauders' damage output isn't all that amazing by themselves means that the additional damage that the Hersir provides is proportionately more impactful than it was with the skin changers we were talking about in our previous section. The Tundra Marauders can also be expected to mostly be engaging weaker targets and targets of opportunity, and not be required to face off against the most dangerous enemy units that are out there, so this should also mean that the even more moderate damage boosts will see them inflict more impactful damage against your enemies. The fact that the Tundra Marauders are also cheaper and they have more models per unit means that you should be more willing to engage in wound trading via to die killings, Berserker Rage ability, taking a wound on your Tundra Marauders to inflict a wound upon whatever you are engaging at any given time. And if you are combining the natural automatic success of the Tundra Marauders with the automatic success from the Hersir, his push ability is automatic success and a yet another automatic success success from to die killing. That's also going to give you 4 automatic successes against whatever you are hitting, and that's quite a performance out of a humble unit of Tundra Marauders. You can even use to die killing when you are making a defense roll to add a solid special to your roll so that you can activate the Tundra Marauders display switch if that's something that you're looking to do. All in all, I really like this combination. The combo of the Tundra Marauders with the Hersir creates a unit that's way more resilient, way more capable of chain activating, or at least activating once more per round potentially. A unit that's way harder to take out, and also a unit that's actually capable of dealing meaningful damage against many targets. I have even had this particular combination dual enemy bulwark units that have been accompanied by character to at least a standstill, and some situation actually wiping them out, or at least pushing them full of stress, leaving the Tundra Marauders free to move along on their merry way. So even though this combination does almost double the price point of the Tundra Marauder unit, I am still going to be called this excellent every day of the week. Okay, now that we have gotten our journey started with the standard non-named Hersir and our Varank units, let's continue straight to the first named character, Njord the Merciless. Njord is a very different beast when it comes to the standard Hersir in what he provides and what he does for the Skin Changers unit. While there is some overlap, like the fact that he is in fact a officer and he imparts quite similar psychological benefits to the unit. He's not going to be increasing their willpower, but he does grant them extra morale, raising them all the way to morale 3, just like the Hersir did. And his Hersir from Brynjalmar ability does carry the Berserker Rage part, so there's also that psychological resiliency and potential fishing for necessary symbols in other roles also baked in. At the same time, Njord does not add any conquest to the unit that he joins, so you are looking at a conquest 0 group of feral fighters rather than actually soldiers who would be capable of securing objectives for your side. Just like before, however, I would be hesitant to want to suffer automatic wounds on my Skin Changers from activating the Berserker Rage all too often. When it comes to the actual combat performance increase in the form of symbols and push modifiers, what Njord brings to the table is quite similar in many ways to what the Hersir does, at least in power level, if not the exact form of the buffs gained. As you can see, the offensive automatic symbol, the automatic success that the Skin Changers gain on their attack, and the offensive push modifier are actually exactly the same as we saw with the Hersir, but quite unfortunately Njord does not bring any additional switch abilities to the unit, so they just have to work with what they've got. On the defense, however, Njord is way more powerful than the Hersir, since he provides that very important automatic success automatic block symbol that helps keep your expensive Skin Changers alive that a bit longer, or in a pinch it can even be used to empower their switch ability to deal damage back against an attacker. The combination with Njord also affords the Skin Changers a second red dice on their defensive push modifier, which can under the right circumstances be quite powerful, so this is a definite buff, and I have seen a unit of skin changers joined by Njord win enemy units charging them by leveraging this push modifier, even though it's the enemy's turn to activate, so there is something there. All in all, however, I do feel that when it comes to evaluating what Njord brings against what the Hersir brings, we are looking at a side grade more than a definite upgrade over here. While Merciless on solo Njord is quite a powerful ability, the watered down version that he adds to the unit that he joins isn't all that amazing. But then again, Hersir from Brynjalmar is actually pretty decent on the skin changers beyond the Berserker Rage gained, since when the unit is charging they are able to pick and choose which attack dice to reroll, which should help the skin changers fish for those double hits on not only the red dice but on the orange dice also, since they are one of the few units that can actually get double damage out of orange dice, thanks to the fact that they have this hollow special switch that inflicts automatic wounds. So that is pretty decent. Then again, if we are looking at this against what the Hersir brings, the Hersir also has his ways of increasing the offensive output of the unit, mainly through his defensive, or rather his switch ability that removes blocks from the opponent with double solid specials. All in all, I'm not a huge fan of this combination due to its high cost and the fact that, as already I have implied, I feel that Njord is almost a side grade when it comes to improving the power of the unit when compared to the Hersir, so I'm going to slap a situational on this one also. There is a case to be made for the fact that the skin changers can form this elite escort that brings Njord with them to the front line and makes sure he gets to where he's going safely, and then he can start chopping with his mighty axe. But the problem with I have this combination and others like it is the fact that when you attach a high moral character like Njord, or as we are going to be soon talking about Alvard Icebear, to a high moral unit such as the skin changers, if you get the skin changers wiped out around your character and they were at a full stress when this happened, your character is going to be left stranded there full of stress and unable to activate until the next round, unless you are able to somehow manage their stress or find the time and the space for them to rest in the middle of the battle being waged. So this isn't a surefire way to sell these types of combinations, to me at least. I need to play with this stuff way more, obviously, and hopefully the next time around when I'm going to be talking about these combinations, I have more firm picture on whether what I am saying here actually pans out when tested over and over again, or whether I was being overly harsh and critical on this combination and others like it. And next up we have the other possible combination with Njord, and that is Njord with the Tundra Marauders. While I do love Tundra Marauders as a unit, I have to start detailed discussion on this particular combination by coming out and saying that I don't feel that there is all that much that special and worthwhile that can be gained through attaching Njord to the Tundra Marauders, at least as long as the Tundra Marauders side of the coin is the one that we are taking a look at. Berserker Rage, extra morale, and the added automatic symbols on offense and defense are okay, but they are something that you can gain with the Hersir at 15 points less cost, and also you can get access to the offensive switch abilities of the Hersir. Yes, you lose out on the automatic block on the defense from Njord, and also you lose out on the defensive push modifier, so there is that. Unfortunately, the Tundra Marauders are not the type of unit that's going to be charging their enemies a lot of the time. Unlike pretty much everyone else in the game released so far, the Tundra Marauders actually suffer a negative impact on their maneuverability if they choose to charge, since their ability to perform a short action move and then use snow leopard tattoo to get where they're going and strike after is such a powerful and important part of what they are and what they do. So you would effectively, if you wanted to leverage the rerolls out of Hersir from Brynjalmar, you would have to be foregoing your movement and snow leopard tattoo to get those rerolls. So that's not all that important or powerful, especially on a unit that's only rolling 3 dice and they lack the ability to produce double successes with any of those. Also, quite damningly, the Tundra Marauders scenario play performance isn't increased by attaching your to them. They are still a Conquest 1 unit, so they will be unable to outscore objectives against enemy units that at this point are probably going to be quite a lot cheaper than they are, thanks to Njord more than doubling the unit's total cost. There is a case again to be made for the Tundra Marauders being a device for ferrying Njord forward, and I actually find this line of thinking to be more applicable with the Tundra Marauders than actually with the skin changers, since with the Tundra Marauders, when you are using the scout ability, you aren't suffering a opportunity cost of not being able to use the polar bear totem, as would be the case with Arctic Fox Totem skin changers if you were to try and implement that plan. I also feel that the Tundra Marauders are quite a self-sufficient unit in a diminished role of skirmishing rather than fighting all by themselves, so I don't see it necessary as that much of a problem if they are used to smuggle effectively this character Hersir into position, and then they can go on their own way, and Njord can do his thing with his blood axe. Then again, you are suffering effectively a more or less cost of an activation to implement this plan, since detaching your character from your unit will force a activation on which you can, for example, attack or do other things that would be more productive. So there's also that opportunity cost to be considered. Hence, all in all, I'm going to call this one situational as well. Next up is the only so far released high command option of Varank origin, that is Alvard the Ice Bear, and the only combination that he is capable of forming with by being a unit attachment, and that is with the skin changers. Just as was the case before, Alvard empowers the skin changers by adding that extremely important third model to the unit, as well as increasing their willpower to a double orange, unlike the options that we have gone through previously, and increasing the conquest value of the unit to a meager 1. He also does provide effectively an additional point of morale to the unit, but what I find interesting and somewhat funny is the fact that instead of having that +1 as the other characters have in this regard. He's just got the flat moral value 3 written down there, and in essence the effect is exactly the same, but the way that you are marking it is a bit different, since the only possible combination that you can execute with Alvard is by attaching them to a polar bear totem bearing unit of Varank skin changers. If you were able to leverage this morale 3 as, say, for example, additional 2 points of morale on someone like, for example, the Tantrum Marauders, this would be rather amazing, but it's not the case. It's just this one single unit that you can attach Alvard to, unfortunately. The Varank Jarl empowers his underlings' attacks by granting them a additional red attack dice, which will result in a 2 red, 3 orange and a yellow attack dice for the unit, which is pretty awesome. He also grants them a push modifier that effectively simply inflicts a single automatic wound through the skin changer's natural switch ability, as well as providing a pseudo elite ability to the skin changer unit on the offense, since he brings along a switch that allows the skin changers to use hollow successes to block or remove blocks from your opponent. Obviously, this isn't as powerful as real elite would be, since this ability's effectiveness hinges on your enemy rolling enough blocks to be removed. But in many instances, this ability should be as good as inflicting additional damage on your opponent. Alvard also makes the skin changers tougher to take on when they are defending, since he not only adds the additional block to their defensive dice roll, but he also brings with him the unbeatable ability, which means that the unit can avoid being pushed back after losing a combat without having to suffer any stress. Unfortunately, Alvar does not actually provide any additional power to the defensive push modifier of the skin changers, so this is yet another missed opportunity when it comes to where I am evaluating this combination from. While Alvar does indeed empower the skin changers to a lesser or greater extent, I still am going to call this combination situational. Just like the case was with Njord, I find this combination to be more about bodyguarding Alvar than actually empowering the skin changers themselves. And I dislike the idea of having a fully stressed out skin changer unit get wiped out around Alvard, since even though he is now detached and he can potentially continue rending and tearing into the following rounds, if he's full of stress, he's unable to activate his powerful chain activation mechanic, since he can get a chance to activate and get his abilities going. So I don't find this particularly enticing combination to make, not least because Alvard himself costs 60 points, and if you are providing him with the henchwomen in the form of a couple of skin changers, you are looking at almost 100 points right there. And with that, we have now completed our look into the currently available Varank characters that can be attached to the 2 Varank units in the spotlight today. If you were left feeling a bit underwhelmed by the evaluations I just made of the combinations, worry not. We have just been spoiled the models, if not actually the rules, for the next couple of Varank models to be released, and soon enough we should have our hands on Escort the Executioner, the Tattooist, and I don't remember currently the name of the named Tattooist model, but anyway we will have more characters, more Varank characters to discuss. But now let's continue to a category of character that's way more fleshed out than the Varank characters are at the moment, and that is the orc counterparts of these warriors. And remember that if you want to attach orc characters into your Varank units, you need to have a War Alliance enabled in your list, which effectively means that you have to pick either Alvard the Ice Bear or Alborg as your high command option and shell out the considerable amount of points that these characters are going to cost. Obviously, you are going to get a whole lot more beyond just gaining access to War Alliance, so don't consider that as a negative having to use either of these characters, but consider it as a bonus that you get when you choose to field them. Playing somebody like Alvard, for example, can be crazy fun, and Alborg has a powerful chain activation mechanic, force-wide one in the Vark and the Crow, so those are good reasons to bring those two characters also. Firstly, let's take a look at combining the named contender character Lotta with the skin changers. This is a truly potentially devastating combination that I have hence named lovingly the Blender Express. Lotta brings many of the rather basic improvements that we see officers bring to the units that they accompany in the form of the extra model, extra morale, and extra conquest. Lotta is also one of those characters who actually increases the willpower of the skin changers by upgrading the orange and the yellow into a double orange willpower roll, so that's pretty nice to see. The passive offensive and defensive bonuses that Lotta brings are pretty standard, but the defensive bonus is actually on the better side when it comes to what the skin changers can expect to have access to, since that the all-important block symbol gives them the choice of reducing damage against your expensive elite unit, or you can choose to trade it in for additional damage if you end up so choosing. Lotta also provides push modifiers both for the offensive and on the defensive. The offensive one ends up being the only push modifier that the unit has access to, but even though Lotta's single orange die push modifier on the defense is on the moderate side, you can combine it with that of the skin changers as of right now. At least we believe that to be the case, waiting on an FAQ. So at least there's that. While I really like Lotta's ability to inflict the disarmed state upon the enemy unit via a switch that's empowered by hollow special symbols, this is a bit of a problematic symbol to be using for such a switch on the skin changers, since if you choose to apply Lotta's disarmed, then you are foregoing inflicting an automatic wound from the skin changer's own standard switch ability. So there's a decision point that you have to make. Obviously, more choices is better for you, but there is some overlap, unfortunate overlap here also. Cat o' Nine Tails doesn't seem terribly powerful, but it's always something additional that can help you out. It effectively can stop enemy units from disengaging from the Lotta-led unit of skin changers, and if and when you win a combat, which you should be doing pretty much all the time, at least as long as Move Your Asses is active, you can then inflict some additional damage against units that are not resistant to chip damage, that is. Where the moneymaker of this combination really comes in is with Move Your Asses, which is the command ability of Lotta's, and also with her offensive push modifier. If you attach Lotta to a unit of, let's say, polar bear skin changers, you have quite a tough unit in your hands. And when you activate Move Your Asses, you are able to access additional 3 strides of charge distance, which more than overcomes the slowness of the unit and actually dials their charge distance to a respectable 12 plus 2 strides, which should see them blaze over the or across the battlefield and reach the enemy lines without being able to be countercharged by most of the enemy units that they will be having access to. Move Your Asses also provides the unit with a decent additional damage output, since it adds an automatic success to each attack and defense roll that the unit makes while the ability is active, but it also grants the unit raging, which is an automatic success, again an additional one if you are completing a successful charge. So let's say you are charging a Lotta-led unit of skin changers against a hapless foe and you have Move Your Asses active. That's one automatic hit from Raging, another from Move Your Asses, a third one from Lotta's passive ability, and if you choose to trigger the push modifier, you are effectively getting yet another automatic success for 4 automatic successes and a auto wound through the skin changers switch. And then there's the potential for the 6th automatic wound from Cat O' Nine Tails after you win the combat. So that's a amount of wounds that not even the most sturdy of enemies can hope to survive without getting bloodied in the process. So whatever you are going to be pointing the skin changers and Lotta at, you are surely going to be making a terrible mess out of them. What's a second or however many good point about this combination is the fact that with Move Your Asses having a limited duration of effectively 3 turns, the high morale skin changers should be able to activate several times during that time and thus get more bang for your buck when it comes to reaping the benefits of that command token you have just used. So it's pretty easy to see that I'm going to create this combination as excellent. Okay, if Lotta was so excellent when it came to combining her with the skin changes, how about the Tantra Marauders then? Obviously, the Tantra Marauders enjoy the support provided by Lotta's basic leadership abilities. Officer grants them additional model, extra conquest makes them better at performing scenario plays, and additional willpower and morale give them more activations and more psychological resiliency. The disarmed imposing switch that Lotta brings to the table is also pretty decent, since the Tantra Marauders can't naturally make use of any other symbols than automatic successes when they are attacking. So there's the additional diversity of symbol usage available in this instance. The automatic symbols that Lotta provides on the offensive and the defensive are pretty nice. They do increase the quote-unquote weight class of the Tantra Marauders a bit, and Lotta also brings push modifiers that Tantra Marauders themselves naturally are unfortunately lacking. And as previously, Cat O' Nine Tails, when it comes into play, can be somewhat of a useful ability to have. Then again, there is a definite Sconergy. A shout out for all of you fellow former War Machine Hordes players out there. There's a definite Sconergy between the Snow Leopard Tattoo and Move Your Asses. Yes, you can access the additional success from added to your attack roll from the Move Your Asses ability even if you are using Snow Leopard Tattoo, but you need to be charging in order to access the additional threat range in your charge movement, and also in order to access the raging part, and this leads to more or less the same type of decision point that we were talking about previously with Njord. So these two pretty much unique and characteristic abilities of this unit and this character aren't really meshing all that well together, and that's a clear pointer that maybe this combination isn't written in the stars. All in all, I feel that the Tantra Marauders and Lotta just aren't right for each other, as sad as that sounds to any of us romantic people out there, but rather they would be happier with someone else. Both are also powerful solo picks in their own ways, so I'm going to be calling this one opportunistic all the way. Next up, let's talk about the skin changers bringing along an orc commander, or rather a Varank commander in this case, in the contender. The contender adds the standard buffs that an officer gives to the skin changers, and this is something that we have already discussed several times over at this point. She also gives the unit an additional point of morale, which helps them resist the stress of battle and also to activate more often. And she also adds a yellow dice to their willpower rather than substituting her own for theirs. And this is pretty nice, since the skin changers are fearless all by themselves, and now you are rolling an orange and 2 yellow dice for willpower on them. So they should be quite reliably passing all their severity 1 willpower tests, and they have a decent chance to pass difficulty 2 ones also. The offensive and defensive performance boost that the contender brings to the skin changers is rather okay, trending towards solid, even though it does feel quite vanilla. The additional automatic hit is, or success rather, is obviously valued on the offensive, and if pushing for additional performers, the contender will not only add a second automatic success, but also a yellow dice to the skin changers already rather formidable attack roll. While on the defensive, the contender provides the highly valuable block symbol, even though her stress modifier of a single black dice isn't going to be all that useful, since the black dice only has a 25% chance of providing the skin changers with a block, and they don't have the ability to utilize any of the other symbols, such as, for example, the special symbols that the black dice is rather adept at providing. All in all, the contender does not add any switch abilities to the skin changers, which is a bit of a shame, especially on the offensive, since you are able to roll at the top end when you're pushing for extra performance 6 dice on your skin changers, but you are only able to make use of 2 of the symbols that you can be rolling, so that does feel somewhat unoptimal. Defiant Leader can be a useful ability as long as you are able to target enemies that are unable to resist its use with any regularity. Obviously, you can stack the deck in your favor by implementing the frightened state via many of the vectors that our forces are able to achieve that, but obviously that's going to pile on the cost of actually using this ability. Defiant Leader not only increases the skin changer's damage output via automatically causing the vulnerable state, but it can also be used as a threat range extender by attracting enemy units towards the skin changer so that they can be charged and subsequently wiped out or at least badly damaged. And this is a somewhat unreliable way, but anyway, it is a way of somewhat mitigating the problem of having to suffer the lower movement and charge values if you choose to go for the more sturdy skin changes in the form of accepting the polar bear totem. Likewise, with the weak natural conquest value of the skin changers, I feel that um, the Defiant Leader can also be used in some instances to potentially push enemy units away from scoring areas so that the skin changers can capture objectives that they otherwise would not be able to simply via outconquesting their enemies. Speaking of outconquesting, it's okay, decent that the contender adds a point of conquest to the skin changers, and thanks to her orc commander ability, the skin changers, who are usually bound to inflict damage on pretty much anything you're facing, are going to be conquest 2 during their own activation. But then again, conquest 2 is not great. It's media core conquest, and you are paying quite a premium for this unit, so I don't think that this is going to be a way of justifying using the skin changers and the contender combination. What I would rather consider as a good selling point for this combination is the fact that it will allow for the contender to assume a aggressive position on the battlefield from which to project or commander to your other troops, and the skin changers are quite adept at fighting off any enemy units that are trying to come and intercept your contender vying for the optimal position on the battlefield. So this is where I find these combinations value to mostly be stemming from. All in all, I'm going to be giving this combination also the situational grade. Next up, we have the Tantrum Marauders with the contender. The Tantrum Marauders are going to be rather happy that the contender will help them improve their otherwise rather mediocre stat lines in a multitude of ways. Beyond adding numbers via officer, the contender also provides the Tantrum Marauders with extra morale for additional activations, extra willpower so that they don't flee quite so easily, and quite crucially, extra conquest and potential for 2 extra conquest thanks to the Orc Commander ability. And I can imagine that your opponents are going to be struggling if they have a pseudo Conquest 3 scout unit with a powerful place ability running amok behind their lines. Defending against such a unit and stopping such a unit from backcapping their important objectives is going to be pretty resource intensive and stressful for your opponent. So this is where I find the appeal of this combination to be coming from. The lack of granted switch abilities when it comes to offense does hurt, however. It's nice that the contender is bringing along a hefty amount of additional successes, and even that success and a yellow dice on the push modifier. But if I was a bit miffed about the fact that the skin changers could only make use of 2 of the symbols that they were rolling, well, the situation is doubly as bad with the Tantrum Marauders, since they don't have any natural switch abilities on the offensive, so the contender only provides them the potential for additional raw damage, and that's it. And all in all, the Tantrum Marauders aren't the most hard-hitting unit from the get-go, so the fact that they are left feeling quite one-dimensional and not all that powerful in this sense can be problematic. So you essentially have to pick and choose quite carefully what to attack so that you can be sure that you will indeed be inflicting damage so that you can trigger the Orc Commander. The contender added automatic block on the defense is quite decent, especially when your Thunder Marauders are still above half strength, since you are getting 2 automatic blocks from the get-go, which isn't all that common when it comes to the forces of the Northern Tribes. The push modifier is a bit more helpful here than it was previously with the skin changes, since the Thunder Marauders have access to a single solid special switch at above half strength and a double solid special switch when below half strength that will allow them to displace during the switchy step of the combat, and the black dice is better at providing these solid special symbols than it is actually at providing blocks for Thunder Marauders to mitigate damage with. Defiant Leader can be pretty useful here also, even though I do find it that with the general so-so damage output of the Thunder Marauders, using the ability just for inflicting vulnerable does not feel all that enticing, even though if you are simply looking to trigger or commander, then that single point of damage can actually be what tips the scales in your favor. Or potentially, if you are facing a unit that's capable of double blocking via switches, or maybe having green dice on the defense roll, obviously there the impact of vulnerable can be quite substantial. I also was thinking that I can't find any reason why you wouldn't be able to combine caltrops and Defiant Leader so as to you could be pushing or attracting an enemy unit so that it collides with the caltrops and thus effectively is stopped from charging during its next activation, and it will also be suffering from the slowed state once it chooses to activate. But I'm not sure how feasible such maneuvers are actually going to be on the battlefield. But that was just a thought I was having when prepping for this one. The Tundra Marauders do grant the contender a unprecedented amount of mobility on the battlefield, which translates into potential for the Orc Commander ability to be used wherever and whenever it's most needed. Then again, I would be worried about when running this combination finding yourself in a situation where the Tundra Marauders and their attached contender are so far behind enemy lines that it's not feasible to access or commander. And do note that the abilities used does actually require line of sight, since there is no loss tag involved. So if your Marauders, Tundra Marauders and your contender are working from behind the enemy lines, it's possible that opposing units will be blocking line of sight to the unit that wants to trigger or commander, and thus they are unable to do so. So all in all, I'm going to be calling this one also a situational combination. Next up is a combination that I didn't think all that much of in the beginning when the cards for the Orc officers were released, but a combination that I have rather started to warm to as of late, and that's the skin changes with the Prime Warrior. The Prime Warrior is an officer, virtues of which we have already discussed at length. She also adds a point of morale to the skin changes, but rather damningly for many of the other combinations that the attached version of the Prime Warrior could be forming, she does not add anything to the willpower of the unit that she's joining. But in the case of the skin changers, they already have a half decent willpower score with the orange and the yellow naturally, and they also have the fearless keyword. And these are just the types of things that I feel help balance the fact that the Prime Warrior does not add to their willpower or provide any other psychological resiliency beyond the additional point of morale. So I think we are good to go from this point, or even from the psychological standpoint. While the Prime Warrior does not add any switches to the Skin Changer's role, she does make their already devastating attacks and potential counterattacks even more devastating. Adding a red dice and a success onto the attacks of the Skin Changers is pretty brutal, and also having access to a additional automatic success on the defensive and a red dice push modifier is pretty terrifying, since an enemy unit attacking the Skin Changers may have to contend at full strength with a unit that's hitting them back with 2 automatic successes and 2 red dice. Ouch. Then again, in all honesty, it has to be said that the automatic success on the defense is objectively worse in most situations when compared to an automatic block, since the Skin Changers could be exchanging that automatic block for a success should they choose to do so. Then again, if you are facing a unit that's capable of stripping your blocks via switch abilities, then the success might actually be better for you anyway. The Prime Warrior single named special ability while attached is called Spurred by Your Energy, and it feeds off the stress that the accompanying unit has gained up until that point. And when we are talking about Skin Changers accompanied by the Prime Warrior, we are actually talking about a morale 3 unit, which is pretty great considering this ability, since Spurred by Your Energy grants the attached unit plus 3 strides of charge distance per point of stress on the unit. So the Skin Changers can effectively access up to plus 6 strides of charge range, thanks to the fact that at 2 points of stress suffered, they get this plus 6. They can never really access the 9 strides, since if you are full on stress, you are not allowed to activate anyway. So there's that. But hey, 16, or if you are fielding them with the polar bear totem, 15 stride plus 2 strides from the base charge distance is quite amazing as is. What's also rather impressive is the fact that the Prime Warrior is the scenario play tool for the Skin Changers, since she adds a point of conquest for the unit for every point of stress they have, plus 1 from her natural passive modifier. So this means that a fully stressed out unit of Skin Changers accompanied by the Prime Warrior actually has the whopping conquest value of 4, and this is actually something that I'm really interested in testing out more, since a unit of Skin Changers accompanied by the Prime Warrior is not only an extremely powerful offensive tool and a nightmare to deal with in melee, but also they are a extremely powerful scenario play tool thanks to their potentially massive conquest value. Also, should you find your Skin Changers wiped out and the Prime Warrior detaches to a lone officer model, her experience and rage ability that I'm going to be discussing in detail in my next unit analysis piece does not require her to activate. It's enough that she is the target of an enemy attack, so she can be useful via this ability, even though she might already be engaged by an enemy and she would be full of stress and thus unable to activate during that round any further. So this is a combination that I really like. The combo of the skin changers and the Prime Warrior does carry a heavy investment in points, however, as we are talking about a 65 point combination. Then again, no matter what you attach to the skin changers with a small asterisk on the Orc Wise main is going to be expensive, so I don't think this is going to be the thing that will deter at least me from trying this combination further. So you won't be surprised, hopefully, when I tell that I find this particular combination to be excellent and worth your time and investment. Speaking of a worthy investment, I'm afraid we are not going to be finding it here when we combine the Tantrum Marauders with the Prime Warrior next. While the Prime Warrior provided additional morale, extra unit member are highly valuable to the Tantrum Marauders. The fact that she does not add to their willpower is extremely damning, since the Tantrum Marauders are not fearless and they are only working with a single orange willpower dice. And this leaves the door open for your opponent to exploit this weakness to deal with your now rather expensive combination of Tantrum Marauders with the Prime Warrior in a resource effective way. The Tantrum Marauders are also not the best candidate for Spurred by Your Energy, since their natural morale stat is low at only a single point. Yes, the Prime Warrior does add that second point, and thus you can access a Conquest 4 unit of scouts potentially. But if you are running the Tantrum Marauders hut on stress to access this Conquest 4, you are also basically leaving them dead in the water, since you won't be able to activate them further during the round in which they are using this tremendous conquest value. So I don't really see it as a amazing tool for a unit that wants to be potentially always on the move and always keeping your opponent on the back foot. The additional damage output that the Prime Warrior applies to the Tantrum Marauders is pretty decent, however, and this helps a unit that's traditionally not all that great at dealing damage deal a surprising amount of it against their enemies, at least if they get lucky on their dice rolls and spike some of those dice. The lack of switch abilities does hurt here also, however. The fact that the Prime Warrior does provide the Tantrum Marauders with a defensive push modifier that effectively grants them that red dice in addition to the automatic hit of damage is something that the opponents of the Tantrum Marauders usually don't have to face. But then again, the Tantrum Marauders are going to be suffering quite a lot of damage once they come under any sustained attack. So I don't think that a single red dice and a single success worth of counter attack is going to help them win any combat resolutions that happen when they are not activating themselves. And they already have a way of bypassing having to be pushed back, for example, after losing a combat when they access their displays allowing switch. Also, I find the idea of a Prime Warrior fighting behind enemy lines to be problematic in the same sense as I just talked about when it came to the contender, since there is quite a realistic possibility of your Orc officer being left stranded behind enemy lines and thus unable to access their own personal passive abilities to the benefits of the rest of your force. So I highly feel like feel very strongly feel like the Prime Warrior is a model that wants to be moving with the main force of your company and not popping behind enemy lines like some of our other characters might feel comfortable doing. Thus, all in all, I'm going to be grading this combination as opportunistic. Okay, next on the menu is the combination that you can form from the models from the Winds from the North and the Beyond Winds from the North boxes, and that is attaching a Vice main to a unit of skin changers. Unlike all of the characters that we have been discussing up to this point, the Wise main is actually a support character, and this is rather problematic for the skin changers since a lot of the benchmark high ceiling performance that the skin changers are capable of achieving comes down to them being at full strength and thus able to access those orange attack dice for those potential double effective double damage rolls. And if you lose one of the skin changers, one of the two skin changers in a unit, then you lose those orange dice from your attack roll, and their ability to inflict damage, at least the high ceiling damage, is greatly affected. As already talked about, this isn't a problem with the officer characters, since the officers will help make it so that as long as there is at least one skin changer alive, you are working with quote-unquote a full strength unit from attacking and defending standpoint. But with the Wise main being a support character, once you suffer enough wounds to lose your first model, you are at a crossroads where you have to choose whether you will now sacrifice the full potential of the skin changers or whether you are willing to sacrifice the Wise main that has joined them. Then again, something that can help you when grappling with this decision is the fact that the Wise main is actually cheaper in points than the skin changers themselves. At 35 points for the two models, the skin changers are on average 17.5 points per model, and the Wise main is only 15 points per model. So you can, if you so choose, to look at this situation in a way that you are okay, I'm actually just getting cheaper additional model and cheaper beginning performance for my skin changer unit by attaching the Wise main to them, and then I'm okay to let the Wise main go when it's time to suffer my first casualty. Something that's also not applicable on the officers but comes into play here is the fact that when you are attaching a support character to a unit, you are effectively substituting the wounds or characteristic of the unit for that of the character that's the support character that's joining them. And in the case of the Wise main, with him having 3 wounds, this actually means that if you attach the Wise main to a unit of Polar Bear Totem skin changers, you are effectively gaining an additional wound on the Wise main, if you are willing to look the situation in this way. So in this regard also, there is quite some decent value available here if you are willing to look at it that way. The Wise main adds a great amount to the psychological resiliency of the skin changers by providing them with an additional point of morale, another yellow dice on their willpower, and the rerolls for their willpower tests. The skin changers are already fearless, so there's no help from that, but otherwise this is quite a decent package. Then again, you do need to recognize that if and when you choose to sacrifice the Wise main as the first model in the unit to go, then you will lose access to all these these benefits. So it really comes down to when it's time to choose your first casualty, what do you value at that point of the battle the most? Do you value the high ceiling that the skin changers are capable of achieving when there are two of those models still remaining, or whether you would like the resiliency and the psychological resiliency of having the wise main with the unit? Um, maybe the most important thing aspect in this regard is the fact that you will be losing that extra point of morale once the wise main goes down. The Voice of Experience will allow you to spend a command token to fix a dice from your dice roll, and I would imagine that this comes into play in the offensive sense most of the time. The orange die has a single facing with a success and a hollow special on the dice, so that's probably the one that I would be fixing for if I were to choose to use this ability, since you will at 87.5% likelihood have just increased the amount of successes you gain by effective successes you gain by at least one. Then again, on the defensive, the skin changers unfortunately lack a green dice or a meaningful switch that they can trigger, so the value of using the Voice of Experience is greatly diminished there. The Wise Main also adds a automatic success to the attack of the skin changers and grants them a double solid special switch that inflicts the vulnerable state, which by the way is also added to the defensive role of the skin changers, which and this defensive switch should be quite easy to trigger thanks to the fact that the skin changers are always rolling at least 2 black dice on their defense. This switch ability isn't amazing, but that's something that the skin changers can still use to make good on their special symbols that they have managed to roll when attacking or defending. The Wise Main also grants the skin changers not only additional power on their retaliatory strike push modifier on the defensive, but he also grants them a decent enough offensive push modifier should that be something that you are willing to go for. Thus, all in all, I was very much teetering on whether to have this combination be situational or excellent, and even though the points cost of the combination was guiding me towards excellent, I eventually decided to go for situational simply because I find that the decision of the first model to be removed as a casualty is so impactful here, and I wasn't comfortable with the choices that this combination was presenting in that regard. And next up we have the Tantrum Marauders with the Wise Main attached. Unlike with the skin changers, the Wise Main's support status isn't all that bad when we are forming a combination with the Tantrum Marauders, since the Tantrum Marauders aren't a frontline combat unit per se, and they aren't expected to suffer as many casualties as regularly, or as many attacks regularly, shall we say, as the skin changers, and also because the performance drop that they suffer at half damage or half casualties is manageable, and you should probably be picking a Tantrum Marauder model every time over removing the Wise Main when the decision point eventually arrives. The added willpower, fearless, and reroll on the willpower rolls is really important for the Tantrum Marauders, since the Wise Main in this way effectively fixes one of their major weaknesses. The additional conquest is also much appreciated, and this is actually the cheapest way that you can access that extra point of conquest for the Tantrum Marauders. The other choices have been close to close to doubling the points cost of the Tantrum Marauders, and some have even been more than that. but in the case of the Wise Main, you are talking about only 15-point increase to the total price of the unit, so that does feel pretty nice. While the Wise Main's added combat performance to the unit isn't going to be something that's going to cause your opponent to fall into total despair, it does buff the Tantrum Marauders from a really lightweight unit to a medium combat capability one, and that will ask a wholly different type of question from your opponent, since they aren't anymore simply going to be wondering whether they can fight off a weak skirmisher unit. Now they have to contend with a way more sturdy and somewhat more offensively capable of unit of Tantrum Marauders and their attached orc character. Fixing a dice on the Tantrum Marauder's offensive roll isn't going to be all that impactful most of the time, even though this ability can still be used to ensure some damage and help trigger the Wise Main provided double special vulnerable inflicting switch. Where I find this ability to be coming into use more often, I think, is with the defensive role of the Tantrum Marauders. Yes, the Wise Main provided switch and the Tantrum Marauders own switch are triggered by the same symbol, that is the solid special symbol, but there is potential, for example, on the defensive to fix at full strength, for example, your black dice to be a double solid special, which means that you can effectively displace twice with that switch. Since you can displace the first time 3 strides, but still end up engaged with your enemy, and then displace again for a second time, and this time disengaging them totally. So in this way, the Voice of Experience can come into play in a rather important way should the situation call for such a measure. All in all, the benefits that the Wise Main offer are good but not amazing. But what he has going for him when compared to the other choices that we have been looking thus far is the extremely competitive price point at which you get access to his services. And thus I'm going to be deciding after some careful consideration to call this combination also excellent. Time to talk about the final character of today's episode, and that's going to be Aalborg, and let's start by talking about him in combination with the skin changers. The fact that Aalborg does not provide any additional conquest to the skin changers is quite alright, since the skin changers standard operating profile does not expect them to outconquest their enemies anyway, so this is one of the weaknesses of Aalborg that does not actually hurt the skin changers all that bad. Aalborg actually gives some pretty decent buffs to the skin changers, which can't be said for all the combinations that he can perform. The 2-member skin changer unit really appreciates the officer status of Aalborg, and the double orange willpower is actually an improvement over the skin changer's own willpower set. And the additional morale and the automatic success and the automatic block are pretty decent additions to the unit. Unfortunately, there isn't much more to say about this combination, as Aalborg does not provide any switch modifiers or switch abilities, push modifiers, or any activatable combat abilities that affect the skin changers themselves in a positive way due to the fact that you have chosen to combine them with Aalborg. We can obviously say that the skin changers are a way of escorting Alborg onto the battlefield, and maybe a way of helping you trigger the Vark and the Grow on a orc unit somewhere else on the battlefield. But all in all, I think this combination is more opportunistic than actually something that I would be willing to pursue from the get-go when building my company. Which leads us to the last combination of today, Tundra Marauders and Alborg. The basic additions that Alborg brings to the Tundra Marauders range from valuable to decent. The second orange dice on the willpower is quite powerful, and the additional point of morale, as well as the extra automatic success and block and the officer status are all valuable. But then again, the lack of additional conquest is extremely problematic, since you are handicapping one of the important reasons that you are potentially choosing to bring the Tundra Marauders from the get-go. It is possible that you choose to investigate this combination as a way of getting Alborg to the battlefield via scout, and also then maneuvering him around it quite efficiently thanks to the snow leopard tattoo. But even though this can afford Alborg some unprecedented maneuverability, you still will suffer effectively the pseudo loss of an activation when you choose to disengage him from the Tundra Marauders unit so that he can actually go and fight something. And also, if and when you want to access the Warg and the Crow for the duration of the battle, you have to keep Alborg safe until at least the third round so that you can activate this ability, extremely powerful ability and one of his selling points 3 times over the course of the battle. So I would still rather see Alborg bring up the rear behind your forces and maintain his presence as a potential counter-attacking threat towards the late game. And once you have triggered the Warg and the Crow 3 times, then it's okay to send him forward and see what's going to happen. But having him go commando behind the enemy lines with the Tundra Marauders and risking getting isolated and killed off before the later stages of the battle just doesn't seem like being worth it to me. And as a result, I'm going to be calling this combination also opportunistic. Phew, with that we have finally reached the end of this video. I'm somewhat terrified how these videos are going to be like the next year when I do these hopefully again, since I'm already spending more than an hour and a half on just the 2 units and the combinations of characters we have available right now. But hey, tomorrow's problems are tomorrow's problems. Thank you for sticking with me, and thank you for your patience. This one took way longer to make and complete than I was planning, but we finally got there. Safe travels to you, everyone, and hope to see you again soon. Goodbye for now.